He slept, unaware that inside him a quiet revolution had already begun. While the house lay dark and the world softened, his cells were shifting gears, flipping an ancient switch that moves the body from store to self-sustain. What your body goes through during 16 hours of fasting is less like a crash and more like a carefully choreographed reboot. Subtle on the surface, radical under the hood. Before we go any further, a quick but important note. Fasting can be powerful, but it isn't safe for everyone. If you have diabetes, are pregnant or breastfeeding, have a history of eating disorders, or take medications that require food, check with a healthcare professional before trying extended fasting. Keep that in mind as we walk through this internal journey. If you're curious about the science of your body and want clear, evidence-based explanations, consider subscribing. This channel dives into exactly this kind of physiology. Dinner is done. Let's imagine the clock reads 8 p.m. The fork is set down, the dishes go in the sink, and the overnight clock starts. For most people, the next 16 hours unfold on a roughly familiar schedule, sleeping, waking, perhaps going about a morning routine and arriving at noon with the decision to eat or continue the fast. But inside the body, a cascade of biochemical events marches forward, hour by hour. We'll break it into 4 blocks, 0 to 4 hours, 4 to 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours, and the final push to the 16-hour apex, so you can see how the system transitions from feast to fast. 0, 4 hours. Abundance mode. Digestion, storage, and a pause on deep maintenance. Right after that 8 p.m. meal, your body is in what we can call abundance mode. The stomach and intestines are busy breaking food into usable parts: glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. Blood glucose rises and the pancreas responds by releasing insulin. Insulin's job is straightforward. It's the storage hormone. It tells muscle and fat cells to take up glucose, and it instructs the liver to store extra glucose as glycogen. Imagine the liver as a power plant filling its reserves. In many people, the liver stores roughly 100 to 120 grams of glycogen, while muscles collectively hold somewhere in the ballpark of 300 to 500 grams, numbers that vary by body size, muscle mass, and diet. During these early hours, excess calories also get repackaged into triglycerides and tucked away in adipocytes, the body's fat coffers. The cellular focus right now is on growth and replenishment. Many anabolic pathways that support repair and building are relatively active, and the cell's deep cleanup processes are on a quieter setting. On the signaling front, growth-promoting pathways, think mTOR, which supports protein synthesis and cell growth, are more active when nutrients and insulin are abundant. Meanwhile, energy-sensing mechanisms that prioritize conservation and repair are held at bay. This is not bad. It's appropriate for the fed state. The cells are stocking up for future needs. That's abundance mode. Now the countdown to cleanup begins. 8 hours. The quiet switch. Insulin falls, liver supplies fuel, fat begins to speak up. Around 4 hours after the meal, things begin to shift. Insulin levels decline as the glucose from that dinner is absorbed and blood sugar starts to fall toward baseline. Lower insulin removes the inhibition on certain hormones and processes that were subdued during the fed state. The liver plays the role of silent hero here. As blood glucose starts to decline, hepatocytes, liver cells, tap into glycogen reserves to keep blood sugar steady, especially for glucose-hungry tissues like red blood cells and parts of the brain. Glycogenolysis, the breakdown of glycogen into glucose, begins to supply circulating sugar. At the same time, the pancreatic hormone glucagon rises. If insulin says store, glucagon says release. Glucagon signals adipocytes to begin lipolysis, the breakdown of stored triglycerides into free fatty acids. Those fatty acids are transported to the liver and to other tissues, where they become fuel. Many people won't notice anything different in how they feel. The shift is mostly internal, especially if they're sleeping. But biochemically, The body is preparing to rely less on recently eaten carbohydrates and more on stored energy. Two important signals begin to trend. Noradrenaline, norepinephrine, can modestly increase, nudging alertness and mobilizing fat, while AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, starts to register the cellular energy landscape. AMPK is an energy-sensing enzyme. When it detects lower energy availability in the cell, it flips switches that favor energy production and conservation. In plain terms, AMPK helps cells shift from growth toward maintenance and efficient fuel use. That's the quiet switch. The body quietly shifts priorities from store more to use what's stored. Your liver keeps the lights on while adipose tissue starts to let go of fuel. 8 to 12 hours. Fat becomes fuel. Ketones start to appear. Mental clarity often rises. By the time we reach 8 hours after dinner, glycogen stores, particularly liver glycogen, are starting to be meaningfully drawn down in many people. Not all glycogen is gone, but the proportion available for quick glucose release is declining. The consequence of that is a bigger role for fat oxidation. Fat oxidation means breaking down fatty acids and burning them for energy. The liver, tasked with handling an increasing load of incoming fatty acids, begins converting some into ketone bodies, small molecules like beta-hydroxybutyrate that can cross into the brain and serve as an alternative energy source. This period often marks the first detectable rise in circulating ketones for many people. Typical mild ketone levels around this window can be roughly 0.2 to 0.5 millimole tel cell, and by 12 hours, some people report values around 0.5 to 1.0 millimole L. Again, these numbers vary widely by individual factors like metabolic health, prior diet, activity level, and fasting experience. Why does this feel different? Two reasons. First, fat yields more energy per gram than carbohydrate, and as your cells adjust to burning fat, energy flow can become smoother, less of the peaks and troughs associated with glucose spikes and crashes. Second, noradrenaline and other catecholamines are often a bit higher, sharpening attention. Many people report clearer thinking, better focus, and a calm alertness in this period. There's also the influence of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein associated with neuron health and plasticity. Research indicates that intermittent energy restriction can increase BDNF levels in some settings, which could be linked to reported improvements in mood and cognition. When mentioning BDNF, it helps to say what it is. BDNF is a molecule that supports the survival and growth of neurons and helps the brain adapt and learn. There's a small testimonial worth noting, a composite of many reports. People often say they wake up and experience an unusual steadiness, an ability to focus that feels different from caffeinated alertness. That's consistent with the metabolic shift toward fat and early ketone use. But while attention and fat use are increasing, the deep cellular housekeeping work is still building. The stage is set for a greater transition. 12 to 16 hours. Approaching the apex, established ketones and the start of meaningful cellular cleanup. Now we move into the stretch that leads directly to our headline moment, 16 hours. Between 12 and 16 hours, the metabolic switch becomes more pronounced. Ketone production continues to rise in many people and becomes a significant, steady fuel source for both the brain and peripheral tissues. Typical ketone measurements around 12-16 hours often fall in the range of 0.5 to 1. 0 mmol, though in some individuals and with certain conditions that range can be higher. These are mild to moderate levels of ketosis, far from the much higher levels seen in therapeutic ketogenic diets or uncontrolled diabetes. And they reflect an adaptive metabolic state, not a pathological one. But beyond fuel economy, something else is changing inside the cells themselves. processes that promote cellular maintenance, most notably autophagy, start to ramp up in a more meaningful way. Quick definition before we go further. Autophagy literally means self-eating. It's a cellular recycling process in which cells digest and reuse damaged organelles, misfolded proteins, and other cellular debris. Think of lysosomes as the garbage trucks or recycling centers in the city of your cell. Autophagy helps deliver the trash and process it into reusable components. Autophagy is not an all-or-nothing switch. It's a graded response influenced by nutrient signals, energy sensors like AMPK, and growth pathways such as mTOR. Lower insulin and nutrient availability, coupled with increased AMPK activity, favor autophagy. At around 12 to 16 hours, many studies and mechanistic models suggest that the signals supporting autophagy are meaningfully engaged in many people, shifting cells from growth-oriented tasks toward cleanup and maintenance. This is the cellular equivalent of closing the factory for a deep cleaning night shift. Hormonal dynamics also continue to adjust. Insulin sensitivity can improve in response to periods of fasting, meaning tissues respond more effectively to insulin when glucose is reintroduced. Multiple studies suggest improved insulin signaling in many individuals with periodic fasting, but results vary. Human growth hormone, HGH, also tends to show rises in fasting conditions. HGH is involved in fat metabolism and tissue maintenance. Research indicates that fasting can lead to increased HGH secretion in many settings, although the magnitude of that increase depends on age, sex, and other factors. We should emphasize that increases reported in some studies do not mean miraculous effects. They mean a hormonal environment that supports fat mobilization and, in some contexts, tissue maintenance. And there's an important cognitive note. With ketones as an established fuel, some people experience sustained mental clarity. Ketones are an efficient fuel for neurons, and their presence can complement glucose, especially when glucose availability dips intermittently. Combined with stable catecholamine signaling, this often translates to the calm focus people describe during longer fasting windows. This is the core of the "you won't believe it" promise. Externally, the person may look normal, awake, maybe sipping coffee, moving through their morning. But internally, their metabolism, hormones, and cells have shifted into a different operating system. The body is using stored fat to feed tissues, ramping up selective cellular recycling, and adjusting hormones in ways that prioritize efficiency and repair. Revisiting the key players in one line each: AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, is the cell's energy sensor that favors energy production and maintenance when fuel is low. Autophagy is cellular recycling, where damaged components are digested and reused. Ketones are alternative fuel molecules made by the liver that the brain and muscles can use. HGH, human growth hormone, is a hormone that can increase in fasting states and supports fat mobilization and tissue maintenance. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, supports neuron health and adaptability and can be influenced by fasting patterns. What's happening at 16 hours depends on the person. Genetics, body composition, last meal composition, prior diet, low carb or high carb, activity level and metabolic health all shape the course. For example, a person who ate a very high carbohydrate dinner or engaged in glycogen-sparing activity might have a different timeline than someone who had a lighter meal or is adapted to low-carb eating. But generally, the 16-hour mark often represents a robust metabolic switch for many, greater reliance on fat and rising ketones, coupled with more noticeable engagement of cellular maintenance pathways. A few caveats. Some studies suggest deeper autophagy and greater hormonal shifts at longer fasting durations, 18 to 24 hours and beyond, but those are additional effects that extend beyond our 16-hour focus. We're anchoring on what typically happens within the 16-hour window, recognizing that continuing may amplify some processes, but that comes with more individual variability and greater need for medical oversight if you have health conditions. Practical realities. How do you feel? So what might this feel like? Many people report a gradual emergence of calm, steady energy. The jittery sugar highs and mid-morning crashes are less common when the body relies more on fat. Some people notice appetite suppression, as ketones can have anorexigenic effects in certain amounts. Others feel a subtle mental sharpness, again a subjective report that aligns with biochemical changes like rising ketones and BDNF modulation. But experiences vary. Some feel lightheaded or low in energy, particularly if they're new to fasting, dehydrated, or on medications that affect blood sugar. Who should be cautious? We'll underscore the medical caution again. Do not interpret this explanation as personal medical advice. If you have diabetes, especially if you take insulin or medications that lower blood glucose, you must consult a clinician before fasting. Pregnancy and breastfeeding are not appropriate times to fast without professional guidance. Those with a history of disordered eating should avoid fasting strategies unless advised by a medical and mental health team. And people on certain medications, including some blood pressure or seizure medications, may experience adverse effects if they skip meals. Safety first. Practical tips for preserving the benefits and avoiding pitfalls. If you decide to try a 16-hour fast and you've confirmed it's safe for you, here are practical, evidence-aligned steps to preserve benefits and reduce risk. First, hydrate. Water, electrolyte-containing beverages, and non-caloric fluids help maintain circulatory volume and reduce symptoms like lightheadedness. Second, when you break the fast, prioritize nutrient-dense foods that support muscle maintenance and steady glycemic responses. A balanced post-fast meal often includes a quality protein source: eggs, fish, lean meat or plant protein, healthy fats, avocado, olive oil, nuts, fiber-rich vegetables, and some complex carbohydrates if you plan to be active. Protein helps stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Fats and fiber slow the glucose rise, preventing a sudden sugar spike that undermines the metabolic steadiness you've established. Avoid immediately reaching for a high-sugar, high-refined carb meal, a feast of pastries or sugary drinks, because that can produce a blood sugar roller coaster and blunt some of the metabolic advantages you were cultivating. Instead, think of breaking the fast as a gentle reintroduction, nutrient-dense, balanced and mindful. If your goal includes fat loss, remember that fasting is a tool to create an overall energy balance that fits your life. It doesn't inherently guarantee weight loss unless it aligns with your total calorie needs and activity levels. If your aim is cognitive performance or improved metabolic markers, track how you feel and consider working with a clinician who can monitor labs like glucose, lipid profiles, and other relevant parameters. The science landscape. What research suggests and what remains uncertain. A wealth of studies, ranging from animal experiments to human trials, has explored fasting's metabolic effects. Research suggests that periodic fasting can improve markers like insulin sensitivity in many people, promote fat mobilization, and trigger cellular maintenance pathways. Mechanistic studies illuminate how processes like autophagy and AMPK activation are responsive to nutrient timing. But the landscape isn't uniform. Variations in study design, population, and fasting length produce a spectrum of results. That's why we use cautious language, research suggests, and in many people, rather than absolute guarantees. Some experimental studies indicate more robust autophagy and hormonal shifts with longer fasts, beyond 16 hours, while others show meaningful changes within the 16-hour window. Clinical outcomes like disease risk changes or long-term weight outcomes depend on many factors and are not fully settled. If you're interested in digging deeper, the description below includes accessible review articles and key studies that outline the evidence. Practical example: a day in the life of a 16-hour fast. To illustrate, here's a simple, practical scenario. Dinner at 8 p.m., balanced with protein, vegetables, and a moderate serving of carbohydrates. You stop eating after that meal. You sleep, and during the first 4 hours, your body digests and stores. From about 4-8 hours, your liver picks up the burden of maintaining blood sugar, while fat tissue starts to release fatty acids. Between 8-12 hours, fat oxidation increases and early ketones appear, possibly improving morning focus. Between 12 to 16 hours, ketones are a steady alternative fuel, and cellular maintenance processes ramp up, with increases in AMPK signaling and a meaningful engagement of autophagy for many individuals. At the 16-hour mark, you arrive at a metabolic state where fat burning is established, cellular cleanup is underway, and hormonal signals favor flexibility and maintenance. A quick, real-world advice checklist. Hydrate during the fast. Consider electrolytes if you're sweating heavily. If you're new to fasting, start gradually. Shorten your eating window by an hour or two and build up. Break the fast with protein first, plus healthy fats and fiber-rich vegetables. Avoid sugary, high-refined carb meals. Monitor how you feel. If you experience dizziness, fainting, severe headaches, or other worrying symptoms, stop fasting and consult a clinician. If you have chronic health conditions or take medications, consult a healthcare professional before attempting extended fasts. Final perspective: adaptation and individual variability. What your body goes through during 16 hours of fasting underscores a broader truth. Human physiology evolved under feast and famine cycles, and our metabolic systems remain remarkably adaptable. For many people, a 16-hour fast flips a metabolic switch, decreasing reliance on meal-derived glucose, increasing fat oxidation and mild ketosis, and engaging cellular repair processes like autophagy. It can bring clearer energy and cognitive steadiness for some, while for others it may be uncomfortable or inadvisable. That variability is not a failure. It's biology doing what biology does, responding to your unique context. If you try a 16-hour fast, do so thoughtfully, prioritize safety, and pay attention to how your body responds. The internal changes are real, even if they're invisible. Your cells are shifting priorities, cleaning up, and managing energy in a way that's different from the fed state. That's the hidden overhaul we hinted at, an operating system reboot that happens while the world sleeps and while you go about your morning. If this fed-to-fast journey fascinated you and you'd like a deeper dive into the studies and reviews that explore ketones, autophagy, and hormonal responses, check the description for vetted sources and further reading. If you found this explanation useful, please like and subscribe so we can keep bringing evidence-based stories of what happens inside us to light. In one sentence to leave you with: dinner at 8, lunch at noon. 16 hours later, your body has often switched from storage to self-sufficiency, directing fuel toward fat burning and engaging cellular housekeeping that helps it run more efficiently. Not everyone will experience every effect, but for many, that quiet interior revolution is nothing short of remarkable.